Good morning. Hello there. Just David here with a few thoughts. Hope you're coping with the latest, more or less lockdown. If you've got anything that you need, please do be in touch. Got lots of people willing to help. Um, Also, just to say, in terms of churches, as you know, we're just offering online worship in the team at the moment. We're kind of looking at every 2 weeks, so about a week's time we'll review that, looking at sort of what's happening in infection rates, etc. So, but at the moment, yeah, we are online. So, anyway, what am I been thinking about? Well, I'm going to ask you: do you like the latest? Do you like the newest? Do you like the best? Do you like the new features? Good. That's absolutely brilliant. You are officially an addict. Um, I don't mean to get to you, but you're an addict. Now I'm an addict. It's fine. Don't worry. I'm recording this on the computer I bought this year. This is, I don't know, a phone that's in the latest round of phones. There's a bike behind me that's the latest bike, and broke down subsequently. We all like the latest, and of course, we also know it's a bit of a con. It's the most common meme used in advertising and consuming as it is to tell you that you must have the latest because it's so much better than last year's model. We don't know. We almost write it off. It's so universal, and yet, as I say, people like me often fall for it. Now, I've got reasons to talk about this. One of the reasons is I saw a sort of a clip that was talking actually about the physical mechanisms of this. So when I say it's an addiction, I mean that quite literally. Evolutionary, there is an advantage to human beings looking for new things because it might be a new source of water or food or shelter or whatever. So we are evolutionary programmed to be impressed by novelty. And they can show that it releases uh, the um, the hormones that are the same one, the dopamines, aren't they? The same ones that are released when we get a high from various other things, which are addictive. And so there literally is a physical addiction to novelty that, as I say, is kind of hardwired into us. It's not a moral fault. It's just a fact of how our minds and our bodies work. I suppose the other reason I've been thinking about this is that, of course, I think it's affected particularly how we've reacted to the restrictions and to lockdown, and it has to me. And I was reflecting about this at the same time. So one of the things I realised was that I don't think I'll be alone in watching lots of television at the moment, and I was realised what I was doing. I was going on. I was looking what was on, and I was always looking for the latest new thing. And I would, particularly if it was serial, I'd watch sort of 3 or 4 episodes if it was good, maybe a whole series. But then I'd be looking for, well, what are my friends saying is the next new thing? Has anybody texted to say you must watch this or that? Is there anything new on iPlayer or ITV or Netflix or whatever? And I realized what was happening. I was constantly on this search for novelty, and maybe you've experienced that because, in a sense, we're pretty bored really in this time, and so therefore this idea that let's seek something novel and new has sort of increased focus. So I've been thinking about that, and I think I've made a conscious decision to try and sort of. I mean, obviously, if something new comes on, yeah, that's fine. Pops up that I know. Oh yeah, I'd like to see that. That's great, but to try and less kind of seek the new, and perhaps just I found that actually just I've read a lot more in the last week or two. Yeah, and just found sort of that sort of rediscovered that love of reading lots. I mean, I always do read, but yeah, it just seems going through a book there's less because it just takes more time. There's less inclination to suddenly sort of grab something else off the shelf. I want to think a bit about this in church context as well, because I think one of the things I'm aware of is that the church is always looking for new ways to do things. Reaching new people is one of the Arsenal initiatives. Fresh expressions, and it's got that feeling of freshness and newness, a lot of which is very good and healthy. But I do slightly worry that it will it lapse into a kind of search for novelty for its own sake. And various theologians and writers have written about this. I'm not alone in that worry, going right back to sort of Newman at the end of the last century, writing about this. So, I think it is a concern. And I was thinking that, the church quite often, well, one of the shorthands it uses, and it is a shorthand. I think, I'm okay with shorthands because you have to know what people are talking about. Is it talks now about traditional church, I think it is, and inherited church. That's right. Get the technology right. The inherited church, and then fresh expressions or new expressions of church or something. And there's a kind of contrast between them, and I kind of understand that that's what they're getting at. But my sort of worry about that is that it's rather short-sighted, and I just want to think about tradition. You see, I think tradition slightly gets a bad name. It's almost as though all I do is read the same books, watch the same films over and over again. I don't. I mean, I never read the same book twice. I don't really like watching films and things a second time, because I think, well, I've kind of done that. But I think that for a tradition to evolve and to live and to grow is slightly different from that searching for novelty. There's that great bit in Yes, Minister, isn't there, where Sir Humphrey says, this is the great fallacy of politicians. Something must be done. This is something, therefore we must do it. And I sometimes think there's kind of a bit of that in the church and in society generally. Something must be done. This is something, therefore let's do it. And I think the interesting thing is, if you took a picture of what's inherited churches, it would be perhaps a robed choir with a sanctuary, ministers' investments, an organ playing, sort of choral music. If you took then a kind of picture of inherited, the sort of fresh expressions, it would probably be, a band playing in front of a screen with images up. Those would be the typical images we have. And my really interesting thing, I think, about that, well, to me anyway, is, of course, having an eye to the history of that. What we call inherited church, traditional church, largely, sorry to disappoint you, is largely a Victorian creation. It's what they thought the high medieval church did, and yeah, some of it's accurate and some of it isn't. But that's right. If you went back to I guess 1850 or so, before all that took up, you wouldn't have found robed choirs. You wouldn't have found the vestments that we have. You wouldn't have found choirs in the sanctuary. It's a late Victorian invention. And strangely enough, if you look at that sort of fresh expression of church, well, bands, yeah, well, the West Gallery band, okay, at the other end of the church, but the West Gallery band was a feature of the English church for many, for centuries, effectively. Read about in Hardy. And also, I mean, I think, the key irony is, the screen covered with images. Exactly, 400 years earlier, the people of that sort of more evangelical Protestant persuasion, what were they doing? They were taking their hatchets and hammers and smashing down screens full of images, and now 400 years later they're putting them up. So it's not that I'm kind of on one side or the other. It's just I kind of think we need to have a view to actually how these terms work. That actually traditional is not terribly traditional at all, and what we think is new is actually quite old. And I think when we understand that, as I say, hopefully what we'll be able to do in the church, and it applies to the world and our own lives, is is having a living, vibrant tradition which evolves and develops and builds on what's gone before and is organic and is capable of change and renewal and all the rest of it, but isn't the search for novelty for its own sake. And I think that distinction is really important in society and in the church. And I would say, particularly as I've got a bit bored in lockdown and I've sought out those things that have, kicked off my dopamines because it's the new, it's the latest, it's the next series on this, that, or the other television program. So grow, evolve, reflect, do all those things, but try to give up that search for novelty. Because I also think, the search for novelty is often somebody trying to sell you something. And I always think every time I start up my computer that, I think particularly probably it's a Windows thing, but, I've had Windows computers for about 20 years and I'm always waiting for them to start up. And they're always telling me the computers are faster and faster and faster. But because they load more and more features onto Windows, every time you start up your latest one, it's actually slower than the one before. And I think that, is almost a metaphor for that search for novelty, for that adding of new features you don't really need, which then actually just slows the whole thing down. I mean, you can't do the thing that you want to do. So give up novelty and look for great organic development and renewal in your life, in the church and in the world. Thank you.